I love this question because it's got a big answer. I will try to break it down simply, though, hopefully without diluting it too much. Brain retraining rebalances the nervous system, and it helps to reveal non-conscious patterns in our thoughts and behaviors that are supporting elevated states of the sympathetic nervous system. Our sympathetic nervous system controls our heart and breathing primarily, and overactivation of it can lead to dysregulation in our endocrine system, such as with our adrenal glands, our thyroid, or in reproductive processes. And our parasympathetic nervous system manages our body's rest, digest, and healing processes. If the sympathetic nervous system is overactivated, we may have trouble sleeping, processing foods and receiving nutrients from those foods, or carrying out digestive functions. We can also have an array of symptoms and conditions that stem from the nervous system being dysregulated or unable to effectively heal or reorganize at a cellular level. And brain retraining helps you establish more balance, and one of the benefits of that can be improved sleep as the body shifts more into using the parasympathetic nervous system. So improved sleep can be a big perk of brain retraining. It can even be the main focus if you're not experiencing any of the other symptoms or conditions that are common from a dysregulated nervous system or a maladaptive stress response. So I don't intentionally have a bedtime routine. I try to be more fluid so that I don't feel like I'm reliant on having that specific routine in order to get adequate sleep. And I try not to overthink it since it's a process that our body should naturally ease into. When I was more mindful or methodical of sleep hygiene, I found that to personally fuel almost an obsessive quality about sleep, or one that was rooted to perfectionism. So I abandoned that kind of process for myself. However, I do have some general boundaries in place to help support myself in transitioning into a restful state. I reserve my bedroom as a place of sleep primarily and will spend my leisure time out in the living room to wind down for sleep. I don't watch TV in my bedroom or read in bed, which is something I had a habit of doing previously, but I found that it kept my mind more active in bed. So I have a subconscious association now with my bedroom being a sanctuary for rest and sleep. And when I go into that room, I default into that mode because of that subconscious association. And prior to going to bed, I wind down my day on the couch, usually watching Netflix or something, with my partner, and I cuddle with my dog. So I am engaging in activities that are supporting natural oxytocin production in my body. And in some studies, oxytocin can promote sleep by countering the effects of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. I am also mindful about what I'm watching before bedtime, so I'm not establishing a black or white rule where I am preventing myself from any screen time, but I'm being intentional about not watching something that's suspenseful or overly dramatic where it might draw too much mental or emotional focus from me and keep me in a more elevated state before bedtime. So I shift to watch content that is more supportive towards calm or lightheartedness, such as something comical, or something that seems to be really helpful is a show that is educational, but for a topic that I'm not particularly interested in, because then it kind of lulls me into this state of wanting sleep. And I'm also more mindful about not working on the couch and to have more boundaries between places of work and places of rest so that it becomes clearer for my subconscious mind. And I've also noticed personally that my sleep cycle is better regulated, and I typically have a better quality of sleep when the room temperature is slightly lower at nighttime than it is during the day, and when I'm in a room with no light pollution. Because I can be kind of sensitive to that kind of thing as in terms of falling asleep. But I don't like to overthink the process or limit my ability to sleep to be reliant on maintaining a certain structure of routine but I do like to be mindful of what I personally find to be supportive or helpful in easing my body into that natural rest state. So, if I wake up earlier than I would like and I'm unable to fall back asleep, I try not to view it as a bad thing or something that will dictate how the rest of the day is going to go from there. If I feel frustrated or pressured by that experience happening, that's definitely not going to help me fall back asleep. And it could also repattern my brain to do that every time I might wake up. So, what I do is I consciously shift into a mindset of acceptance. Sometimes these things happen, and it's okay if they happen. If you lay in bed and you're not asleep, but you're not really engaging in any activity, your body is still being granted rest. And there is value in just that experience. It may not be the ideal, but it can still be helpful and restorative. And if you're ready to move out of bed and start the day, there are no rules to how early you can start the day. We develop habits and routines, but it's okay to step outside of those structures and meet yourself wherever you are. Sometimes I start my day earlier than I expected to, and sometimes in doing that, my body will realize that it does need more sleep, and I'm successful in going back to bed. These moments don't happen often for me, but if they do, I try to make peace with it and not put any pressure on myself to change it in that moment. And I move into a state of acceptance because I think with that, it's more supportive for the body overall. There are a few things that you can do. You can take an active approach and try switching up your nighttime routine and see if there is a way that you can support yourself in transitioning into rest more deeply, such as something restorative that happens ahead of bedtime. I used to do gentle laughter yoga in the evenings early on in my brain retraining practice that would end with an extended yawn flow. Everyone on the call would be yawning over and over, and your body releases these relaxation chemicals while yawning. So it was a means of practicing and strengthening production of those chemicals. You can also take a more passive stance where you're not focusing on changing the insomnia, although it's still the goal, but you move on to achieve it by shifting that inner association of insomnia. So if you experience it, it's not having any emotional power over you where you're frustrated by it, but you move into more acceptance of it. When I experienced insomnia, I would try to shift into focusing on what I still had and not what I lacked. So if I was comfortable and resting, I acknowledged the benefit of that, and I tried to settle in knowing that that was okay and I wasn't pressuring myself to have perfect sleep. Another thing to consider if you're already implementing a brain retraining practice and experiencing insomnia is to look at your daytime schedule and see where perhaps maybe that balance between rest and action is a little off. If there's opportunities to engage in more restful activities or balance out any extended time that's spent in elevation activities, that would be something that I would suggest looking at, as well as that can kind of pile up, and then when it's the end of the day and you're in bed, you can maybe be giving the brain an opportunity to sort through all that stuff that it might have been easier or more effective to sort through it during the day as it came up. So I would look to see if there's an opportunity for that involved as well. Yes, I feel drowsy usually when I've had a fuller day or one that was not effectively balanced between activities and restorative opportunities. But there are times when I don't feel drowsy at all and I get to bed and I might still feel awake, but I fall asleep anyway. I think my sense of what was normal for sleep got influenced by the challenges and experiences that I had surrounding sleep. but I don't think having or not having that drowsy feeling is indicative of anything good or bad. I think it can just be the experience without that need to label or change it. Sometimes I took an anti-inflammatory medication or I called upon a supportive tool such as ice or heat to help bring more comfort. I think it's okay to implement other modes of comfort alongside brain retraining if comfort is not yet available through it exclusively. The whole basis of brain retraining is to stabilize the nervous system through a foundation of safety and security. And sometimes it can be too extreme to go from using something to not using something. So I don't think it should be a negative experience to call upon a support for assistance in achieving comfort, but I also feel like brain retraining can be an eventual means of resolving that need for additional things if it's incrementally approached. Before brain retraining, I wasn't experiencing relief from the supports that I mentioned before, and I just simply endured the pain. I found if I didn't focus on the pain and tried to more consciously move to an area that didn't hurt, my brain had a better opportunity to shift into a place where sleep would come. Whether it was out of pure exhaustion or not, a shift was more likely to take place if I somehow moved away from focusing in on the pain. When we sleep, our body also produces pain-relieving chemistry, so if the conscious mind shifts into thinking about more calming topics, that chemistry can already start to produce. Visualizations or guided meditations can help facilitate that shift in focus. And I would listen to sleep meditations in bed prior to brain retraining in an attempt to create that for myself. And sometimes it did help, but brain retraining, the further I got along with it, the more stable things became, and the more my body shifted out of that chronic pain state that I was stuck in. I did, but I had adverse experiences. So, where it was meant to calm, functionally my body was stuck in fight or flight. So, it was converting that calm chemical into excitatory chemicals instead. And I talk more about this in the other video to give more about the background and more information about this experience. So, no, supplements were not a supportive component of my journey and my means of resolving any sleep issues. I think this answer will be true for rewiring most conditions or symptoms, not just insomnia, but let's approach it from the issue of insomnia. So I think step one is making peace with insomnia and not trying to change it directly, because that can be a place of disempowerment, because we don't have direct control over these sorts of things. Through brain retraining, we provide a more supportive ecosystem within the body through thought and behavior management so that the conditions can resolve through the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you're currently using a support to achieve sleep, I think that can be a good place to practice acceptance and know that if that particular thing is providing comfort and achieving the goal, it can be helpful. However, if your mindset starts to shift into a place of curiosity to consider what might happen without the support, or consider that maybe the support isn't actually providing that ability to sleep, but that the nervous system is more regulated underneath it and it's now able to effectively sleep. If that's the case, I would gradually begin to decrease the use of the support. So it's like incremental training, but you're reducing something instead. And now, if the support is a medication or supplement, that would be a method to develop through the guidance of a medical professional. However, a similar practice might be what is suggested to create a gradual adjustment for the body. I think when changes are too abrupt is when things can be counterproductive to the goal. The same thing can be said for earplugs. Maybe one night you sleep without them, and if you wake up, you can add them back in if needed. It becomes more of a fluid process of adjusting as needed, while also stepping out of that established pattern slightly to see if comfort still exists outside of the illusioned box. First off, I would like to say congratulations on your progress and your commitment to yourself. I'm happy to hear that you've had positive effects while brain retraining. Looking back at my own journey around the 18-month mark was where I established more regular use of other compatible restorative practices to that foundation that I had built through brain retraining. The thing that makes everyone's journey unique is belief, and what personally one might enjoy or gravitate towards may not resonate with someone else, but that doesn't discount its effectiveness for that person. When I started to branch out from my brain retraining practice, I approached it somewhat by feeling and what appealed to my interests. One of the great gifts brain retraining helps to establish or strengthen is our inner wisdom and that sense of intuition that is uninhibited by fear. We're able to more effectively discern when fear is guiding or the limbic system is leading through dysregulated emotion, and when the higher self or the higher brain is navigating our decisions. We also know that switching things up and changing routines can be a supportive practice for enhancing neuroplasticity and encouraging the brain to be more adaptable to change. So I think it's a good practice to just explore additional things without putting any added weight or pressure in them having a particular outcome. So you are already set up with what sounds like a sturdy foundation in brain retraining, so anything added at this point can be approached as a form of incremental training or exploration for mood elevation. You have tools from brain retraining to help that guide and support that process of testing things out. I know for me personally, when I tried things in the past, I did not have the intended results because my brain was still functionally limited by that maladaptive stress response. So restorative activities were not having their intended effect because my brain was stuck in survival mode. But as I shifted out of that chronic state, I was able to benefit from such practices when I attempted them later in my brain retraining practice. So if you find something new that you'd like to try, or something from the past perhaps, but maybe experience reservation or hesitation, I would try to approach the situation more neutrally so that any belief of doubt or skepticism isn't informing that outcome or experience. In whatever modality you choose to explore, I think the best support you can offer yourself would be to embody a mindset of curiosity or play. If you can find things that are naturally that for you, that might be a place to start. For my own journey, I tried a number of different things just as a means of trying something new and not with the mindset that I necessarily needed it to heal. I actually found a lot of healing and rebalancing for my nervous system in pursuits for more play. So with the creative arts like music or dance, since my professional life was centered around visual arts, I kind of gravitated around that territory rather than embracing it as a means of exploring play. But I also explored past hobbies and developed new hobbies, which I found to be deeply healing too. I think whatever you choose or try to will be of benefit, whether or not you choose to continue it, because it will serve to at least give you further insight to what resonates with you and what brings you restorative neural chemistry. Ultimately, it's that chemistry that's doing the healing, so it's not specific to the modality, but what you personally experience in using that modality. And you could embrace other modalities, or you could embrace hobbies or interests that can have that same healing benefit.